Hi, I'm Bill, and I'm an eclipse chaser. Let's begin by setting up the Vixen mount tripod. Spread the legs. I like to lower the legs, but not all the way. It's important that we set the SX on the mount to be due north. So let's take our best guess where due north is. Between the legs is a screw peg. We want to take it out from between the legs and insert it into the SX hole on the mount. Okay, now we got to find true north. I use an app on my iPhone to find true north. Not magnetic north, but true north. And it's important that we get pretty close to begin with. So let's set this on here, trying to line up this peg with true north. Okay, pretty good. We're within a degree. Okay, now we're going to have to level them out. I just use a little carpenter's level that I had at home, line it up with each leg, and then move the leg Okay, now that we're level, it's time to put the mount on top of the tripod. The peg that stands up on the tripod must fit between these two flanges. So there isn't much play. That's why it's very important that we start at true north, because there's not much adjustment that we can do once the mount is on the tripod. Now let's put the mount on the tripod. It's important that you hold on to the mount at this time because it can fall forward. It's heavy in the forward direction. Now we reach under. There's a screw that attaches the mount to the tripod. So we're going to tighten that. Okay, let's put the paddle onto the mount. I found a design on the internet, and so I made the dimensions of this paddle to fit my iPhone and my mount. And then I had a manufacturing company print this in 3 dimensions so that I can align now my mount with the North Star even in daylight. I use an app called Polar Star Alignment Pro. I like to have my phone held away from the metal and the electromagnetism of the mount. So we put the paddle on, we put the iPhone into the paddle, and now we bring up the Align Pro app. So even in daylight, this app will give us a good idea where Polaris is in the sky, and we adjust the height of the mount azimuth of the mount until we have the crosshairs pointing right to the middle of the target. Now this will not give us a dead nuts on polar alignment, but what it will do is it will get us so close that when we use the polar alignment scope inside the mount, we will be able to see Polaris when we begin polar aligning with the telescope inside the mount. Because I knew I would be in places where 110 volt power may not be available, I chose to use a lithium battery to run my mount. This is an 11 amp hour lithium battery, so no problem using it all night. I put Velcro on the battery and on my tripod, and I use a plug to go from the battery to the mount. Now, half of this is supplied with your purchase, but you have to buy the female end to make it complete. You only get up to the cigarette lighter. You can buy this at Amazon. And here is the on-off switch to power the mount. Okay, now we're going to add the Starbook 10 to our mount. I've already attached one end to the Starbook 10, and now I have to attach the other end to the mount itself. I think you're going to like Starbook 10. It has a planetarium program in which I find extremely helpful. Okay, now just tighten up the thumb screws here to hold the cable to the mount. And now we've set up this far. Now it's time to add the telescope to the mount. The first thing that one needs to do is turn the knob where the counterweight shaft is and lower the counterweight shaft. If the counterweight shaft is not lowered, you cannot see through the polar scope. Okay, now we're going to add a counterweight to the counterweight shaft. At the bottom of the counterweight shaft is a knurled screw that's slightly larger than the diameter of the counterweight shaft. This is to keep the weight from accidentally slipping off and falling on the ground. So pick a convenient place, maybe halfway, and reinsert the knurled thumb screw. Okay, now we're ready for the telescope. Okay, let's add the telescope now to the mount. So we slide the Vixen bar into the mount and then tighten first the black screw and then the silver screw, which I call the safety screw because it's meant to keep the telescope from sliding backwards out of the mount. Okay, I've got a finder scope and a guiding telescope. The finder scope is important. You'll need that to zero in on the stars as you're going to a star align later on. But you don't really need the guiding scope to begin with. Now this is a cross-aim lens that I use. It has a crosshairs in it so that you can find the exact center of a star when you're star aligning your scope. And this has a red light to illuminate the crosshairs. So I put the illuminator into the lens. Always make sure it's off and carry spare batteries because you're going to leave it on. And now let's put this on the mount. Now let's add the lens to the telescope. I take out the dust plug and insert the lens. Tighten the thumb screws. You don't want this falling backwards out of the scope. Okay, now we want to balance the telescope. So we loosen the clutch, hold on to it so it doesn't swing wildly, loosen the clutch, and move it to about the 90-degree position. Now, that's awfully well balanced. I don't know how I did that. But let's say I hadn't balanced it so well. Let's move it somewhere else. Loosen the clutch. And now the telescope definitely wants to go down, so we move the weight back, tighten the thumb screw until we've achieved balance, and neither side particularly wants to fall. There are little black marks on this mount which are super helpful because they tell you when the mount is straight up and down, and when it's facing north, and when it's facing west. Alright, now we've got to balance the telescope in the other direction. And so we have another clutch that we have to loosen. And as you can see, the front end of the telescope is definitely heavy. It wants to go down. So we'll tighten up this clutch, holding on tightly to the telescope. Loosen the silver safety catch first, because if you don't, you won't be able to move it. And we'll let it come down a little bit, tightening up both screws. And now let's see where we are. And you can see we've achieved balance. Neither end particularly wants to go down. Okay, so the mount wants to be facing west. So we'll loosen the clutch. Move it until the black marks are aligned. Tighten the clutch. And now we have it facing west when we're polar aligned.